Today on The Future of Everything, the future of historical thinking. So unless you're a historian, you might not think about history very much or not think that you're thinking about history very much. We make history, we observe history, we record history, but in many ways, our individual and collective thoughts and actions create the historical record that shapes our world and the world of the future. And these days, much of our individual and collective thoughts and actions are experienced on the internet. There are many issues there. I think many know the issues. Content on the internet is voluminous. There's just a lot there. Content on the internet is not consistent. It's not at all hard to find contradicting information. Content on the internet is not even permanent, and we've all gone to that website that is no longer there, and there's no really rules of permanency for many of the web resources that we use. And finally, content on the internet is not labeled as fact-based or fantasy-based or wish-based or agenda-based. It's just there. So we've heard that increasingly people are hanging out in their own corner of the internet where their own views and their own biases are reflected. It's been called an echo chamber, and where exposure to new ideas or different ideas might be very, very limited. Now, for many of us who grew up without the internet or in the pre-internet time, we were not really trained to manage this deluge of information. But perhaps the troubles we're having are a result of the novelty of the technology. But what about children growing up in this environment? Are they learning better than their parents how to navigate the internet, extract useful information, and make productive and well-informed decisions? Well, Professor Sam Wineburg is a professor of education and history and American studies at Stanford University. He studies how the youth uses the past to construct individual and collective identities. And in particular, recently he has studied how high school-aged adolescents interpret information sources and achieve digital literacy. Sam, some of us have a vague hope that our children growing up in the internet world will naturally develop special instincts about how to seek out true information and discern reliable from unreliable information. How is that going?
Well, I hate to start on a negative note, Russ, but it's not going well.
Oh.
So, again, there's a lot of terminology that we use in our culture of digital natives, and that young children born with silicon sprouting out of their fingernails, it's a bunch of bunk.
Okay.
And I think that it begins with a kind of optical illusion, right? We see our kids using their phones at the same time that they're talking to us, at the same time that they are uploading a picture to Instagram, at the same time that they're texting a friend, all the while conducting a conversation with us. And we make an inference that because they are sophisticated in using digital devices, they also possess the same sophistication for discerning the information that these devices yield. And 1 + 1 does not equal 2 in this instance.
Huh.
We often know how to use a device, but that doesn't mean we understand the mechanics or the affordances of that device. And that's the case with our young people.
Now, I know that you recently published a study where you looked at more than 3,000 high school students on this issue. And I've only seen a summary of it, but could you take us through why did you do the study? What did you do? And what did you find?
So I've been at this, for about the last 5 years, right? So in 2015, we were contacted by a foundation. We had been working on alternative assessments for historical understanding, rather than multiple choice tests, giving students short documents and asking them to think about those documents. Well, we were contacted by a foundation in Chicago to develop an instrument that tried to measure what students actually do on the internet in terms of the information that comes across their screen. And in 2016, we published our first study about this. It made a lot of headlines because it came out at the same time as the 2016 election with President Trump, and the way that fake news became a part of the headlines. Well, we were contacted by another foundation, in this case, the Hewlett Foundation, that said, we actually need a national sample of students that will give us better data. So they provided us with funds to do a survey in toward the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019, with a sample of students that reflects the demographic of American high school students. So really, this was a study that was commissioned by the Hewlett Foundation. And what is unusual about the study is that it's not a survey and it's not a self-report. We actually arranged every single student to have a live internet connection and look at the actual kinds of digital content that comes across their screens.
Wow.
So the way that I can summarize it for you is, yes, we had over 3,000 students. And just to give you a sense of what we found, one of the tasks that we had students do was to look at a Facebook video. And this Facebook video claimed that there was, and this will seem very, very timely, but it was actually a Facebook video that went back to 2016 in the Democratic primaries. It claimed that there was large-scale voter fraud in the 2016 Democratic primaries for the president.
Huh.
It's a grainy Facebook video. And all you need to do, now recognize that we told the high school students you can do anything you normally do, leave the video, go on the internet, Google something, go find it out. But your job is to say whether this is a reliable, trustworthy source of information.
Now, let me just ask you, did you create this, or was this a real video that somebody created?
This was a real video that went viral.
Okay.
And because it went viral, and because it was misrepresented, because actually the video was shot in Russia and it was about Vladimir Putin's election. There was a ton of stuff on the internet for debunking it. All you needed to do in your browser was to put Democratic primary video, voter fraud, trustworthy, whatever. I mean, stuff just came up. Snopes had something, BBC had something, a variety of sources. How many students do you actually think track down the source of that video with a sample of 3,000?
I mean, so, the optimist in me says, okay, maybe 30%.
I wish you were right. I wish you were right. Go way down. I'm not going to embarrass you, because I think it's not an issue to joke about, because I think it's indicative of just how deep of a hole we're in. 3 students in 3,000, 1 student in every 1,000 actually got to the source of this video.
Oh, wow.
So anybody who talks about our digital natives who know what to do on the internet and are able to sleuth and find information in ways that their grandparents can't, they actually need to check their data.
So so that's okay. That is not a laughing matter. Was performance on all of the tasks uniformly bad? Are they good at anything? And I don't mean they. I shouldn't say. Are our children learning skills? Did you see any evidence for skills, or did you figure out what the deficit is?
Well, first of all, let's not badmouth our kids.
Right.
Let's and we certainly can get into this topic, because we have data that show that our vaunted Stanford students don't do too well. That academics at 5 different universities, we certainly can go into that. So again, let's not say the problem is with the kids.
Right.
The problem is with, to paraphrase Thoreau, we have become tools of our tools. The rapidity and the changes in technology are such that they've exceeded our human technologies in keeping up. So no, the response to your question is, there really is not a flicker or a sign that they're great at something and not good at other things. Across the board, students are not terribly good at tracking down information and making judgments about whether it's something they should believe or something they should reject.
Now, was it a matter of motivation? How did you motivate these students to do a good job on the task? Because I could imagine that if your life depends on it, or in some sense, something important to you depends on it, you might work harder. But you can see I'm grasping for straws here, but I'm just trying to, let me ask the question. What were the motivations for the students in the study to do well?
Well,
If any.
the motivations were that this is a technology that they're familiar with, that they are online all the time, that they spend much more time in a digital environment than they do in an analog print environment.
Yeah.
And they've got a little bit of self-esteem to go on,
Right.
a little bit of, we're good at this. We are digital natives after all. Now, of course, were there kids that blew it off? Sure. So let's come up with a very kind of liberal estimate. Let's say that of those 3,000 students, 1,500 of them said, screw this, we don't have to do this, we'll just mess around with it. Fine, that still leaves us with 1,500 students. And so let's say 3 students in 1,500 tracked down when they really wanted to try the source of that video.
Yeah. So now in talking about this, I know that you've made a few critical takeaway points, and I wanted to ask you about them. One of the things is that you're not so fond about saying that we have to teach critical thinking, that's the problem here. It's that I think you've said that critical thinking is not the issue. Could you unpack that for me? Because it seems like there's this huge urge to say, didn't you think about this? And didn't you think critically? But maybe that's not the right way to approach it.
I don't think it is the right way to approach it. Listen, critical thinking is important. We should all be critical thinkers. So you should be a critical thinker. I should be a critical thinker. We should all think critically. It helps. But the problem on the internet is a problem of attention. That if we, so there's a saying by the Herbert Simon, who was a polymath Nobel Prize winner in economics, but he was really the founder of artificial intelligence and the founder of cognitive psychology. I mean, the guy was so brilliant that it's impossible to enumerate all of the fields that he was exceptional in. And he tells the story, and again, it's fascinating. This is how prophetic the man was. In 1971, he writes a paper, and he talks about the problem of overabundance. And he begins with an anecdote about his neighbors who on Easter get 2 bunnies, and they don't realize they get 1 male and 1 female. And it leads all of a sudden to an overabundance in his neighborhood of bunnies. And what does an overabundance lead to? It leads to scarcity. And in this case, an overabundance of rabbits leads to a scarcity of lettuce. Right. And then in this essay, Simon makes a really interesting turn. He says, what does an overabundance of information lead to? What does information consume? And he says, the answer is obvious. Information consumes attention. Now, when you think about it, and you think about a term that's very popular right now, the attention economy. There's a professor in the law school at Columbia, Tim Wu, who wrote a whole book about this. The whole goal of our platforms, of whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, is to keep our eyeballs on the screen. They want our attention because the more our eyeballs are on, the more attention that their platform consumes, the more ads they can show us, and the greater the profit margin for these platforms. So the problem of a digital age is the problem of the allocation, the wise allocation of attention. Now, what does critical thinking consume?
Right.
Critical thinking, by definition, consumes attention. If you critically think about everything that comes across your screen, you will very soon be sapped of any attention.
Paralysis.
You'll become a zombie binge watching Netflix where you are simply exhausted.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to the Facebook video. Do you need to critically think about? A lot of the kids critically thought about the video. They looked at it from different angles. They said, well, it's grainy. And how many different instances of voter fraud does it have? And well, it's only reporting in Arizona and only this is wasted mental effort. Mm-hmm. The problem when you come across something and you have no idea of its provenance, if you have no idea where it comes from, the wisest thing to do, rather than do a deep dive into it and looking at it from every angle, is to open up your browser and do what professional fact checkers do. And I can tell you why I know this. Professional fact checkers do not dwell on a site that they don't know. They don't waste their attention on something that's unfamiliar. When they come to a website that's unfamiliar, dispensing information about, you name it, any public policy issue, charter schools, private prisons, minimum wage, and they come to an organization they don't know, and do they go into the Excel sheet of the data that the organ? No, they open up tabs on their browser and engage in something that we call lateral reading. They learn about a site or they learn about a claim by leaving it, which is in many ways the opposite of critical thinking. Now, it's critical thinking when they have to go to the different sites to think about it. But their first move is not to waste attention on something that's unfamiliar, making claims that they're unfamiliar with.
Right. So it's almost like they're looking for metadata as one term about the site to figure out if it's worth even reading in the first place. Is that how fact checkers are actually checking facts these days? It's so I guess I'm trying to bundle this up into useful action items for people who want to try to do a better job at this. And it's to remember that paying attention to anything is costing you time and attention. And therefore, before you pay attention to anything, you kind of have to vet it. And you're saying that this can be done relatively quickly, or am I simplifying too much?
It can be done in as little as 30 seconds.
Okay.
So can I give you an example?
Absolutely.
I'll give you an example that distinguishes professional fact checkers from other smart people. Because we tend to say, oh, well, this is the difference between smart people and those people who aren't so bright. Well, we actually have done studies on this where we compare fact checkers, and I'm purposely emphasizing comparing professional fact checkers to other smart people.
Other smart people.
Because you know what happens with smart people?
I'm afraid to ask.
They think they're so smart that they can outsmart the internet.
Huh. And what does that mean?
Well, so here's the example. First of all, a bit of background. The professional fact checkers. So again, we can go into the whole story, and I can tell you the story about it. But to cut to the chase, we got on planes from our San Francisco airport and flew to Washington, D.C. and New York City, where we watched professional fact checkers at the nation's most prestigious news outlets. I can't tell you which ones, but if you were to guess, you'd be right.
Sure.
And we opened up our laptops and showed them a series of websites and recorded what they did.
Oh, now, this is great. So this is real getting down and dirty.
Rather than proxies of what you would do, or Saturday night or Monday morning quarterbacking, or being in the passenger seat telling the driver how to drive. No, we actually watched what people did. And so one of the websites that we asked them to look at was, here was the scenario. You've got a kid who's being bullied in school. What do you do? And here's a website on adolescent bullying from a group called the American Academy of the American College of Pediatricians. Okay. It's got an official logo. It looks great. It's laid out in scientific manner. It's got professional references to it. It's got all of the kind of accoutrements of a scientific paper to it. You've never seen this group, the American College of Pediatricians. Now, when we gave this to smart people, academics, as well as Stanford students, who are supposedly, at least they tell us, Russ, that these kids are smart and they've been handpicked out of thousands that want to come to our
5% accept rate, things like that.
5%, yes. Well, when we give this, what do Stanford students as well as academics tend to do? They tend to read it carefully. They look at the logo. Now, if you're not an expert about this and you're not familiar with the topic, then it's very easy to become bamboozled.
Yeah.
Now, what do professional fact checkers do at these news outlets? They don't waste time on this. The first question they ask is, what is this group? Right. Before, and here's where I would make an amendment to the use of your word meta understanding. No, This is not meta. That's a too big of an academic term for what's going on here. In the case of fact checkers, you know what they did sometimes? Not all of them, but many of them did this. The first thing they did was they put the name of the organization in quotation marks, which again, you need to know a little bit about Google to know that otherwise Google will search for the words on different pages, on the same page, but not together. American College of Pediatricians. And one of the first sites they went to, I'm going to pause there to see if you want to fill in the blank.
I mean, so you Google, I mean, I would Google it, and then I have no idea.
The first site they would look at was in a bunch of cases, Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
Now, what do they do with Wikipedia that the average person often doesn't do? They skip the entry and they go immediately down to the references at the end to see if there is a source that they recognize that's authoritative. In the case of the American College of Pediatricians, there is a letter that was in the Internet Archive by Francis S. Collins, MD, PhD,
director of the National Institutes of Health.
National Institutes of Health, who wrote a letter condemning this group for misusing data and being prejudiced against a population of LGBT youth.
Oh my goodness.
And then there's another reference there from the Southern Poverty Law Center labeling this group as an anti-LGBT hate group.
Okay, now, hold that thought. This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. More with guest with guest Sam Wineburg. I'm very caught up here. Next on Sirius XM. Welcome back to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with my guest, Professor Sam Wineburg, about disinformation, misinformation, and the ability of regular people to adjudicate the truth on the internet. And I interrupted you, but you were telling this fascinating story about a real, almost like a anthropological or ethnographic study of fact checkers and how different their approach to information triage, if you will, is not just from regular people, but people who are like academics and who would call themselves smart. So what else did you see in those fact checkers, and what can we all learn from them?
So the first thing that, again, just to reiterate, the first thing that fact checkers do is they engage in a different kind of reading. It's a reading that is particularly tailored to the internet. So if you think about what school teaches us to do, school teaches us to engage in what we call vertical reading. When you're given something, you're not being thorough if you don't read it from the beginning and go all the way to the end and then come up with a judgment. Somehow, if you skip around or just skim, you're being capricious or whimsical, or you are not engaged in critical thinking. That's what school teaches us. But on the internet, if you do that with everything, you will have no attention left for the things that are important. The first step in critical thinking is making a decision about what is worthy of critically thinking about.
Yes.
Critical ignoring is just on the internet is just as important as critical thinking. Yes. And so we don't teach critical ignoring in school. So fact checkers, they don't read vertically, they read laterally. When they come to something that is unfamiliar, before investing attention, they open up other tabs on their browser to decide, is this something worthy of my thinking critically about? The second thing that I'll mention, again, there are quite a few things, but the second thing is I like the way that we talk about it. It's got a little bit of humor in it. So when we watch the undergraduates or we watch high school students Google something and they get the results, they engage in what we call promiscuous clicking.
Promiscuous clicking.
They click the first thing that happens to walk by. And it's usually the first or second or third thing on the search engine results page. Now, what do fact checkers do? They engage in what we call click restraint.
Oh, this is great.
They sit back from their screen and they engage in result mining. Rather than pressing on something, they try to figure out what kind of information neighborhood have we landed in? Who's got the prime real estate here? They understand something about what's called search engine optimization, the way that search results are scanned, and the way that there's an $80 billion industry a year on getting your result to the top of Google's prime real estate and pushing your competition down to the bottom. So they sit back.
Incredibly sophisticated, yes.
They sit back and they say, oh, and again, this is like 15, 20 seconds. Where have we landed? Who is controlling the territory here? So that the first click is a judicious first click, because we know what happens with promiscuous clicking. You click on the first thing and 45 minutes later, you're watching cat videos on YouTube.
The final common video, yes.
And you don't know even how you got there, or what, you can't even remember what originally started your search. So again, that kind of first click is often destiny, and fact checkers make that first click with a degree of wisdom that often evades the average person.
You know, it seems hopeful here, because what you're describing doesn't seem like a enormous change in behavior that might be required, but I might be being Pollyanna-ish about this. I mean, so you've chronicled that these problems exist, and you've chronicled that there's at least 1 or 2 classes of professionals who have learned these techniques. What's the prognosis for the rest of us? Should we be hopeful, or are we doomed?
We should be hopeful. We can't. I'm an educator. I'm not allowed to be pessimistic. I have to be an optimist. That's my professional calling. No, we don't just document the problem. We try to intervene and see if we can change it. So again, I'll give you one example.
Please.
We were contacted. There was a professor at the University of North Texas in Denton, a professor of nutrition, who read some of our early research and said, "Sam, my students are falling for all kind of bogus nutrition information. What can we do?" So we talked with her, and we created modules about common false misconceptions about nutrition information that go viral on the internet. For instance, there is this one video that supposedly you can tell whether cheese is real or processed by taking a lighter to it. Completely bogus, but it's a video that's been viewed 80 million times.
80 million.
When we went into the class and we gave a pretest to the college students, 3% of them, only 3% of them, left a particular website in order to document, to verify another claim. When we embedded our modules and taught these techniques, which are not rocket science, but they do demand a change in perspective.
Yes.
At the end of that course, 77% of students verified a claim by going outside of the claim to look at what the rest of the web had to say. So yes, these things can be changed, but it demands a change in perspective and an attention that this is a problem that's eating away at the fabric of democracy. And if we don't do something about it, it's our doom.
So in the last 10 seconds, thank you for that story, because that really is uplifting. Last 10 or 15 seconds, can everybody learn this? And where should it be in our curriculum? Is this a grade school issue, a high school issue? When do we start teaching people about these skills?
We start teaching people about these skills, particularly, let's talk about our youth. At what age should we start? The moment we give our kid a smartphone.
Okay, there you have it. Thank you for listening to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. If you missed any of this episode, listen anytime on demand with the SiriusXM app.